It's time again for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show I'm getting back to the Star Trek CCG because I'm going to answer a couple questions from viewers that have been posed to me recently. And these pretty much ask if there are any quick tips for the game that might be overlooked. So I'm going to show you a few simple things and talk to you about them that you might not do in the game and might not think about. So let's get started. A wise man once said that sometimes it's the little things that make all the difference. I'm going to show you several little things on today's show that help the Star Trek CCG that you might not think of and that a lot of players seem to ignore for some reason. There's older players that don't do much of this or new players that don't think of it, so let's get started. The first one is your Q's Tent side deck. And with this, don't switch up a lot of the cards in your side deck. If you're using a lot of power cards, they'll work with almost any deck in any situation, especially if they're really good cards. The only time you have to worry about switching up cards in a side deck is if your side deck is more tailored to your main deck. In this case, my side deck here comes from my Federation deck, so I have 2 extra power personnel and a runabout should I need them. Other than that, the other, say, 10 cards in the side deck, I don't really change them. I might swap out 1 or 2, but otherwise I leave them. Number 2, take more than 1 deck with you, especially if you're just going to a house game with your friends. As I've stated before on this show, you should be taking at least 2 decks and some extra cards with you wherever you go. That's why I have a secondary box, a lot smaller than anything in my collection, where I have a few decks and I have extra cards. I understand you might just be going to play with your friends, but if you're only bringing 1 deck, you're only having 1 dimension of gameplay, and it's not going to be a lot of fun. Which leads me into number 3. Deck boxes. These are great for any situation. I have several, from my Dragon deck box to my basic Ultra Pro deck box. I know, random cheap plug that I wasn't trying to do, but deck boxes come in handy because instead of toting around something like this, you could tote around a deck and maybe put 10 extra cards in each deck box with each deck. So you could just take 2 of these with you. I prefer having a full-size box with a deck box inside, but it's up to you. Number 4, keep a set of dice with you. I know this isn't Magic the Gathering and you might not think about bringing dice with you for the Star Trek CCG, but if you want an easier way to keep track of battle damage, or for a lot of those cards that require countdowns, that have that little green square with a number in them, so they count down to 3 or 4 turns, this is a great way of keeping track of it by having it. At the most, you're going to use a D6 or a D8, but you can use whatever you want. You think of it, I'll use a D12 just because. And it's an easy way to keep track of it, and you can put it right in front of you next to your draw deck or your discard pile. Finally, and this is in response to that question, is rule books. I was asked, how many rule books should I take with me? When I go even to house games with friends, and you've seen my white deck box over there, I usually have 3 or 4 different rule books with me. Anywhere from DS9 to the original core set, Starter Deck 2, and Voyager. And sometimes I'll bring a rule supplement page with me just in case. Yes, you can reference a lot of the rules on the internet, but you can't beat the original little rule books that came with the starter decks. They come in handy in a lot of cases. And believe it or not, the last couple times I went to tournaments, I saw judges carrying some of these on them as well as a quick reference. Not only do they have their many pages with the paper clip or a staple that they're taking with them, they also have a rule book that they brought themselves. I know these are just little things, but this can come in handy, and I hope I've answered those 1 or 2 questions that came my way in regards to this. Now, that being said, out of all the tips I just showed you, there's 2 of them I wouldn't really encourage going to tournaments, and that is taking huge boxes of cards, even this size, because you're going to take up table space or you're going to have to put it on the floor. It's going to get kicked around. Stick to 2 deck boxes or a very small cardboard box. The other thing is don't bring a whole shit ton of rule books and start whipping them out at some points of the game. You should already know the rules before you get there. For a tournament, it's quick reference, and that's why they have the judges. If you're there and you're going to be pulling out a little rule book every time, you're going to slow down the game, or you're going to piss off everybody around you, so don't do that. That's all for today. Have a great day, everybody.